Hey, I'm Jamie Stegmaier, the designer and publisher of the game Expeditions, the new game in the same world as Scythe, the 1920 plus world that Jakob Rosalski created and continues to create art in. Created, I think, around 130 plus unique illustrations for this game. Today, I want to talk about variability and replayability in Expeditions. This is a question that's come up a few times. It comes up about any game. Are you buying a game to just play it once, or are you buying a game to play dozens of times, as people have done with Scythe, for example, and Wingspan, one of our other games? And so, yeah, I'm going to talk about these topics of variability and replayability today. And as part of that, I want to reveal to you all of the mech mats, because a key element of replayability, not the only one, but a key element of replayability and variability in Expeditions are the asymmetric pairings in the game. So the asymmetric pairings, I've already talked about in a previous video about the characters and their animal companions. So there are, here's for example, Gunther and Nacht. They are a pair of a character and an animal companion. These are your starting cards, or these could be your starting cards. Here's Akiko and Jiro. Here's another pairing here. So these two cards come together. They start in your hand at the beginning of the game if you are that character. So you have that. You have a character and companion that go together, but you also have a mech mat. So instead of just having one asymmetric element, like the animal and the character, you also have something else random paired with it, which increases the asymmetry, the asymmetric pairings, the number of possibilities by quite a bit. There are 5 mechs. There are 5 mech mats. I'm going to show you all 5 mechs in a second, and I'll show you the mech miniatures, specifically the metal versions, in a second. Here's what the plastic miniatures look like, and here's what the metal miniatures look like, and I'll show you for size comparison. Here is a metal mech from Scythe, so you can see how much bigger these mechs are from Scythe. You just have one mech that you're using to walk around in Expeditions. So the asymmetric pairings, let's start with starting with Lumberjack here. So Lumberjack's ability, and these aren't super asymmetric abilities. I didn't want them to be too asymmetric on the extreme. They are slightly asymmetric abilities. Lumberjack says whenever you vanquish, so this is when you remove corruption tokens from a location. Whenever you vanquish, reduce the cost of the first corruption of each color by 1. So if you have a few different corruption tokens stacked up on a location, you can use, and you have this mech, then instead of like the top token, if it's a 5, it could become a 4. So it uses less of your power or guile, which is tracked over here, to remove that corruption. Every corruption token that you remove, you actually hold on to it. It's worth 2 coins at the end of the game, which can add up quite a bit. So that is, let me show you the mech too, actually. Lumberjack. Here's Lumberjack, and here is the Lumberjack miniature there. There we go. It's a little dark in my room today, but you can tell that this is it's an inked miniature. Yeah, the metal ink. The plastic ones are not inked. The next one is Highlander. Here's Highlander here. Highlander looks like this. There's Highlander. And again, these mechs are not associated with a faction. There are no factions in Expeditions, just characters and companions, and next headed out to Siberia to investigate what's going on with this meteorite, this meteor that crashed and created all these meteorites across the region, creating corruption and other issues. This ability is you may gain cards directly to your hand. So this is a simple ability, but it's pretty powerful. Usually when you gain cards in Expeditions, they go to your active row. They kind of go to this other row of cards. It's essentially your discard pile, but the cards actually matter over there. Sometimes they matter. But this one says whenever you gain a card, it goes directly to your hand instead. So that's pretty powerful. It's quite good. And this is a good reminder here that some of these abilities I designed to kind of teach players the default. So this can be a rule that you can maybe overlook or forget, that you gain cards to your active row opposed to your hand. But if you have this mech in play and someone reads that ability out loud, everyone at the table will realize, oh, that must be different than the standard for this game. So I like using asymmetric abilities to remind players of rules that they might overlook or might forget. That is Lumberjack, or that is Highlander. I already did Lumberjack. Here is Tatanka. This is the one that I mentioned earlier. This is the biggest, heaviest mech. It's a giant mech here. There we go. There's Tatanka. And Tatanka is so big that it can hold extra stuff. It says you may solve, upgrade, and meld up to 5 times each. So this is when you take either an item card and you upgrade it under your mech map permanently. When you solve quests up here, and also when you meld meteorites under here and score points. Gain coins. Normally, you can only do this 4 times. You can only solve 4 quests. You can only upgrade 4 items. You can only meld 4 meteorites. But with Tatanka, goes up to 5 instead of goes up to 4, which might sound like a small difference, but it can make a big difference when you're scoring all those melded meteorites in extra time. Or if you just load up on upgrades early on in the game and you have all these special abilities. Getting that 5th star or 5th heart doesn't actually do anything, but quests are very lucrative if you're pretty good at solving quests. It's a fun part of the game too. Here's another simple one. This is another one that reminds you of the default in the game. So this one is Marsh Strider. Marsh Strider. I love these long legs. This is a weird mech, but I really like it. Here is Marsh Strider and those long legs that can kind of step over marshes. Marsh Strider says that your move range is 1 to 4 locations. So most mechs have a move range of 1 to 3 locations. This is kind of reminding you that this is different. The standard is a little different here. You can walk a little bit further, move 1 to 4. I actually played around with different versions of this ability, like stepping over a location that hasn't been revealed yet. That didn't work as well in playtesting, so we ended up just extending the range. This is a mech that has a longer range. A move range, so it can move up to 1 to 4 spaces at a time instead of 1 to 3. And that can make a big difference. This is a pretty big setup of tiles that can go out on the tile. It's always on the table. It's always 20 tiles. So being able to walk around that quickly is pretty big. Our last mech here is actually this is the one that's the most similar to a mech in Scythe. This is a Viking-inspired mech. This is Odin's Wrath. Odin's Wrath. And with Odin's Wrath, the ability is you may trash a map at any time on your turn to gain a power, a guile, or $1. So this is another mech that's really encouraging exploration. Go out there, get some maps. You generally gain maps when you reveal a new location. And this gives you a purpose. You can actually use those maps on an ongoing basis. Otherwise, there are only certain cards in the game that use maps. There are also a few other ways to gain maps. Some cards give you maps, and I believe 1 or 2 locations also let you gain more maps. The observatory comes to mind in particular. So you can actually use maps. You want to target maps if you have this mech. So this is one key element of replayability in this game. That you might play a game of expeditions with a certain combination of characters, companions, and a mech. And then you might try again with a different combination, and that might lead you towards a different strategy. It doesn't necessitate that you try that strategy, but it might lead you towards a different strategy. So that's one element of replayability in the game. The next element, pull up my little list here, is the locations themselves. So at the beginning of the game, you'll start out with, and there are 20 location tiles in the game. They're always the same 20. This is important because there are quest cards that correlate to each of the specific locations. So you have to go to a specific location. If you have a quest, let's see if I can find an example here. I should have had an example ready. Sorry about that. So there might be a quest that says go to location 18 to complete this quest. And so location 18 always needs to be in the game. And yes, we could have had like multiple versions of location 18, but that can be pretty arduous with setup. And so we didn't do that. We just have one location 18. But however, at the beginning of the game, you start out with all southern locations. They're randomized and they're put in specific configuration on the board, all the southern locations. So these are, again, they're always out there, but the configuration is a little bit different. And so for these, it's the configuration that's variable. For the rest of the locations, the central and the northern locations, here are a few central locations here. There's a central location. These are hidden at the beginning of the game. So these are also randomized. They're hidden. And the order in which you uncover them, the order in which you reveal them becomes the variable element, as well as where they are located. So southern tiles, just where they're located. Where these are revealed can make a big difference. So early in the game, if you reveal this location, for example, then early in the game you might take care of the corruption that's seated here on top of glory. Might give you a way to boast early in the game. Also gives you access to more power guile early in the game. this is where these are the benefits that you're gathering at these locations. So even though the same 20 locations are always in the game, where they are on the table and the order in which they are revealed, if revealed at all, you might have games where certain locations aren't revealed at all, can have a big impact on the variability and the replayability of the game. So that's where the locations come into play. I've shown you some of the southern and central locations there. There are also northern locations. They kind of get more powerful the higher up you go. So those are the locations. Okay, here's a big element of variability and replayability in the game, and that is so you have your two starting cards, right? Your character, your companion. There are also 90 unique cards, 25 items, 25 meteorites, and 40 quest cards spread out through this giant deck. And 90, I don't know how you react to the number 90. That is entirely up to you. But for context, I looked at the game Dune Imperium, one of my favorite games. I consider Dune Imperium to have a high level of replayability and variability. And Dune Imperium is one of these games, these deck building games, where you aren't gaining cards every turn, rather you're gaining cards every round. And so you end up gaining like between maybe 8 and 12, maybe a little bit more cards than that over the course of the game added to your deck. So it's not a lot of cards added to your deck, but those cards have a big impact on your deck. And I would say that is very similar to expeditions. The cards you gain have a big impact on your deck. You're seeing these are not shuffled, so you're seeing like all the different yellow related meteorites. These are different mechanically and different artistically. Here's some of the quests here. I see 2 quests for every location, for example. So in expeditions, you're probably going to be gaining over the course of the game, probably around a dozen cards, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, a dozen cards. And in fact, it's probably a little high. It's probably very similar to Dune Imperium, really, maybe 8 to 12 cards. So you're only adding 8 to 12 cards. So those cards have a big impact. The order in which you gain them has a big impact over what your game will look like. And in addition to that, the order, and so also at any given time, only 5 of these are face up. So on any given game, you might end up seeing maybe a third of the deck, and then 2/3 of the deck you won't even see. So that also adds to a lot of kind of mystery. I would recommend like not looking through this deck of cards before you actually play, if you want full. It's not really a spoiler game, but if you want to discover the cards as the adventurers in this game are. Let me jump to some of the items over here. And so part of this is the cards that you're gaining and how you're using them when you're gaining the cards. But the other part of that is when and which cards you decide to use to upgrade your mech. So I mentioned the melding, the upgrading, and the quest. I won't go into what each of those mean. I'll talk about them in a different video. But for the items, for example, you can choose to upgrade this item and you kind of remove it from your hand. You can no longer play that card, but instead you slide it under your mech a little bit, revealing this ability. And from then on, you get this ability all the time. That ability is always present. Let's see what this one says. Whenever you gain a map, so this could work well with that with the Odin's Wrath mech that I mentioned. Whenever you gain a map, you may gain 1 guile and rearrange your location's corruption. So you can actually manipulate the corruption tokens on your location to better benefit how much power or guile you have at that moment. So yeah, each of these has a unique ability. The items have a unique ability that you can insert under your mech mat and have that ability from then on. So I might have a game where I play this card a bunch of times. I might have another game where I gain this card and I upgrade it right away. So for the rest of the game, I have that upgraded ability. That's entirely up to you. And also the cards that you have in play, there's a little bit of variability in terms of which workers you actually get, because to activate this ability, all this stuff down here at the bottom half of the card, or bottom third of the card, I need a worker. I need to place a worker there. So am I going after a certain color of worker more than others based on the cards that I'm getting? That can also add to the variability. This also goes with meteorites. Meteorites who are melding under your mech and scoring. And so you actually turn the meteorite sideways like that. This one says gain $1 per purple worker with a max of 3. So you score this when you meld this meteorite, but you also score it every time you meld another meteorite. And so again, the order in which you meld and the cards you choose to meld can make a big difference on what your strategic path looks like and how much you're benefiting from it. And last, we have those quests that I was showing you here. So the quests, Adds, again, variability based on which locations you're going after in the game, what benefits, what costs and benefits that you gain when you gain those cards. Yeah, there's just a lot of different quests to accomplish. There are 40 different quests in the game. You're only going to probably solve, well, you can only solve 4 of them unless you have Tatanka, and then you can solve 5. So I think a lot of variability comes from this deck of cards. Oh, and actually, I don't know if I finished my example with Dune Imperium. So I was talking about the number of cards in the deck. There are 90 cards in this deck, and you gain about as many as you gain in Dune Imperium. You see about as many as you see in Dune Imperium. Dune Imperium has 67 cards in their deck. 67 cards, and some of them are duplicates. And we've got 90 in Expedition. So I'm not really, I don't want to compare the games here, but I'm comparing them because they are very similar in terms of how often you gain cards and how often you actually use the cards, which is quite often. Adding a single card to your deck in Dune Imperium or a single card to your hand in Expeditions makes a big difference. It has a pretty big impact. And so there are more, if you have played Dune Imperium and you consider it to be a game with lots of replayability thanks to those cards, there are more cards, far more cards, individual unique cards in Expeditions than in Dune Imperium. Last, this is entirely in your hands as a player in terms of what you choose, but there is replayability and variability in terms of the goals that you seek to accomplish in the game. So you only have 4 stars, unlike the 6 stars inside. You have 4 stars in Expeditions, and so if you are able to place all 4 stars, typically only maybe 1 or 2 players will be able to do that. 1 player will do it to trigger the end of the game. But there are 8 different goal categories here. One is consolidated into one of 2 options, either having 7 workers or 5 maps. But which goals you would choose to complete and accomplish in the game can make a big difference in terms of your experience in that game. So there might be a game where I say, okay, I'm going to go after upgraded items in this game. I'm going to go after them. So that'll impact like which cards that I get, which items I use, which items I upgrade, the abilities on those items, the order in which I've done that, and that's the goal that I'm accomplishing in this game. I can have a game where I just focus on corruption. I try to just focus on cards and things that give me a lot of power and guile, and I walk around and I clear corruption off the land, and that might be my strategy. I might go after even more guile and power. You need 20, or you need a total of 20 guile and power to clear the corruption from location 20, and so on. The goals that you choose to accomplish, just like in Scythe, can lead you down very different paths from game to game. I believe there's a lot of replayability in Expeditions. I really do. At the same time, I understand that many people will only play a game a few times. So I design Expeditions so that hopefully you will have a good experience the first time you play. There's a lot of discovery the first time you play in particular. But I think there's a lot of depth in terms of the sheer number of cards, the asymmetric elements, the locations, the order of operations, the order in which things come out, and the order in which you upgrade and meld and solve. I think all of that can make a pretty big difference in terms of making one game of Expeditions feel very different than another game of Expeditions, which I think many of you value. And so that's why I wanted to create a game that accomplished that goal. So yeah, if you have any questions about replayability and variability, please let me know in the comments below. I'm happy to answer those questions. Yeah. Thanks for joining me today for this discussion. Oh, and also, before I forget, also let me know if there's a topic that I haven't covered that you'd like me to cover in a future video. I might do a full playthrough at some point. Again, I'm not an expert at doing playthroughs by any means. There are content creators that are much, much better equipped and experienced at doing that. But other than a playthrough, let me know what topic you would most like me to cover about this game. I'm happy to do that in a future video. Thanks.